Remember a couple of weeks back when Monster Hunter Stories 3 was coming out and people were hyping it up as the Pokemon killer and how it looks and plays way better than any Pokemon game? What happened to that? Oh, yeah, it was outperformed by Pokemon Pokopia. Yeah, nobody's talking about Monster Hunter Stories 3. Nobody cares about it. I didn't even buy it. I couldn't even finish the demo because I was so bored to tears of this generic IP and their inability to do anything to evolve or grow. Okay, they've had 3 games to get this right. I've played Monster Hunter Source 1, I've played 2, no interest in 3. I was like embarrassed that they even tried to put out a third one. Okay, I was like upset when I saw this. Like, what are they doing? Until they fix the garbage combat and they make these games more interesting, I don't want to see them again. Okay, Monster Hunter Stories is slop. Always has been. But for some reason, Monster Hunter Stories 3 decided, Twitter decided that like this was going to be the next Digimon, and they decided to glaze it and say it was going to be like the Pokemon killer, and that it was going to like dethrone Nintendo, and it was going to like, I don't know, make Pokemon a PlayStation. I don't know what they wanted. Okay, I don't know what they were trying to do, because like it's like we see this every time we see a game come out that has like monster collecting aspects. Is that you have some dipshit who comes out and tries to say it's gonna like be better than Pokemon, and then like a couple of thousand people like the tweet, and then it becomes a thing. It becomes a fad. Like, Monster Hunter Stories 3 is way better than Pokemon is right now. Oh, I can't wait to play this game. And then it comes out, no momentum at all. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody cares. Nobody's hyped for this at all. Like, you can't build your brand around like hating Pokemon, essentially, is what I think a lot of these games don't understand. Like, this is what like killed Yokai Watch, actually, was like all these Pokemon comparisons, all this idea that like yeah, we're gonna be the next Pokemon, having 2 versions, trying to like recapture the Pokemon phenomenon, and like just getting completely demolished and wrecked. Like, I get it. It's very interesting to see how much Nintendo and Level 5 work together to try and make Yokai Watch a success in the West, and just how much it just completely collapsed. Okay, like again, like nobody's even asking for like Yokai Watch 4 to get ported over here. Okay, nobody cares. So seeing Monster Hunter Stories 3, seeing it get like so much hype and attention initially, only for it to get like no momentum at all upon actual release. It's a Digimon thing all over again. This is the same thing we see happen with every single Digimon game now, where we have Twitter freaking out, saying it looks way better than Pokemon, saying it's a masterpiece, and then oh, look at that, it's on sale for $6 like a year later. If you play the game, you find that it's slop. Okay, I've had that experience with Cyber Sleuth, with what was the other one I played? Like Survive. I've played these games. Digimon just at its core is not as well thought out of a brand as Pokemon. It's just not that good. And again, people complain about the visuals of Pokemon and things of that nature, but the simple fact of the matter is Pokemon is a gorgeous series, okay? Like, the creature designs are top tier, the evolutions make sense, they do a lot of good world building, like, they do everything that you want out of these monster collector games. And like, when you look at Monster Hunter Stories 3 in comparison, this is a Monster Hunter spinoff. Why is it not treated like a mainline game? Okay, why did they come up with this weird alternate like scenario in which like, oh yeah, there are people out there that ride on monsters instead of hunt them, and then like they have this weird like cheesy tone, and they have this goofy talking cat, and they just have this like, it feels like it's made for little kids, especially for the first one. It's like they didn't make a linear like JRPG based on the Monster Hunter license. They just made this weird, like, just cheap ass, just lazy derivative knockoff product with like no clear focus or idea of like what it's actually trying to do. Like, the rock paper system combat system sucks. Like, the monster collecting sucks. Like who was this game made for? It's just my opinion. Like, when I look at Digimon, like, who exactly is this for? And it really does just feel as if these things keep getting produced because they're very specifically appealing to, like, the Pokemon knockoff audience. Because there is a massive audience of people who will worship these games simply for not being Pokemon. Okay? Like, they'll sell 1 million units just for being a knockoff Pokemon brand. And I guess companies know that, and that they're willing to, like, invest in that and, like, support this demographic. But I do think going forward, we do have to more vocally come out and say that, like, these games typically aren't all that good. You know, they're not all that well constructed. They're not that well made. They're not competitive with Pokemon. They don't have as much of a cultural impact as Pokemon. Like, why do we have to pretend every single time one of these comes out that this is going to be the next Pokemon? You know, we saw this with Temtem, we saw this with Power World, we saw this with Pikmin. Before that was straight up just delisted by lawsuits. We're seeing it now with Monster Hunter Stories 3. Like, why do we go through this song and dance every single time? You know, when is one of these games going to, like, actually eclipse Pokemon? Well, to do that, it would have to, like, have a very successful video game franchise. It would have to have a TV show adaptation. It would have to have a TCG. It would have to have, like, it would have to be merchandisable. Like, that's not something that any brand can just do. Like, it's really easy to, like, look at all the Pokemon plushies you see in public and thinking that, like, oh, yeah, people would buy a PAL. You know, they would buy a PAL plushie or, like, a Digimon plushie. Well, if that was true, why don't you see them around? You know, like, they're just never going to be as popular or successful as what you see out of the Pokemon brand. You know, because they don't have the momentum, they don't have the decades worth of history and, like, build up and of a fan base. You know, there is no possible way for a brand to come out of nowhere and be Pokemon. You know, the brand that, like, eventually competes with Pokemon is going to have to stay consistently good for, like, 30 years and develop its own organic fan base. Like, it cannot just coast off this idea that, like, oh yeah, it looks way better than Pokemon, bro. Like, it has way better graphics. Like, that's not going to cut it. That's not what Pokemon fans are looking for. That's not what, like, fans of the genre want. You know, this is a series that started on Game Boy, okay? Pokemon was never a cutting-edge title visually, which is something that I think a lot of people have trouble wrapping their minds around. But Pokemon's unique appeal comes from those limitations. Okay, the simplistic character models give them a kind of charm that something like Monster Hunter, Digimon, or Power World simply can't really replicate. You know, that becomes more and more apparent all the time, and I really wish that more people really started to understand this and celebrate this about the brand. Like, Pokemon doesn't have to look super realistic in order to have compelling, appealing visuals.